Hello, listeners. Welcome to season 2 of the Masters Decoded podcast. I am Manish Merchant, the chief decoder. I want to thank you for the overwhelming response to season 1. Your feedback and encouragement led me to bring you season 2 of the Masters Decoded. The season will tap into how technology, artificial intelligence, and other socio-economic factors have impacted my guests' careers or passions. My next guest on today's podcast is Monica Jasuja. She is a digital business executive with over 20 years of global experience in strategizing, defining, leading, building, and deploying commercially viable, innovative software products and solutions, primarily in financial services. An accomplished product leader who has worked in multiple geographies like USA, Singapore, Taiwan, and India. Without much further ado, let me get on with it.
Hi, Monica. Welcome to Masters Decoded podcast series. Really glad to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for the invite and really look forward to spending some time with you.
Cool. Monica, what I'll do is I'll put you in a time capsule right now. And that time capsule will take you back in time. And the reason is because, I typically ask somewhere in the middle, but I want you to go back into the time where a small girl studying in Delhi and then suddenly decides to go to US. How did that happen? What was going on in that little Monica's mind to take her to US and do her master's there?
So this is a great question, but actually wanted to just clarify. For me, I started out doing my master's actually in India with a US degree because I did it first online because this was one of the online I2CS programs through University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And the reason I didn't go to the US was because I was so petrified. And it was one of those things that I used primarily as a tool for myself to probably get out into the real world, but without really getting out. And it was one of those things whereby this came really easy for me because it was right in Delhi. I could have done it from the comfort of never leaving really home, as in home as I understand, which is Delhi, etc. But to tell you the truth, when I started out and I was doing my masters, I actually have two masters. When I was doing my first masters, I was one of those people who would never have ever thought that I would have a career, let alone be able to do something in computer science, because I'm one person who actually is a computer science master's without actually having done a line of coding till the point that I got into the master's program. So, and I got into the master's only simply because I really wanted to exceed. I didn't. Just a little bit of background. I did my bachelor's in mathematics, and then I did my master's also in applied mathematics, which is basically operations research from Delhi University. And never had ventured outside. Basically, a very, very sheltered person, because when you are in Delhi, born and brought up, you typically have the best of the universities available right here. You don't really need to venture out. But then I realized that it was really not my calling. Mathematics teaching wasn't my calling, and I wanted to explore something outside. This just fell into my lap. But I wanted to give you a glimpse of that person who was standing there making this decision. Somebody who would never speak, was very reticent, was one of those introvert people who would speak only when spoken to, would not as chatty at all, absolutely zero confidence. And one fine day, and that was the time that normally as girls get married. And I told my parents that I actually don't, and I wish to actually study. And not only study, I've made up my mind that I'm going to study about something that I have no idea about. And a very expensive education program back in the day. And it took a lot of convincing on my part to myself, not to my parents, that I needed and I wanted to do this. After exploring all the options that were available, this seemed to be the best possibility. It took about a year and a half of rigorous education. And of course, I gave up a lot of dreams, and I made my parents also sacrifice a lot for this to happen. Because back in the day, this was education loans were not easy to come by. It was a huge investment. And at that point in time, the only thing in my mind, the only one picture of that I had in my mind that I wanted to achieve was be a working individual. And you will laugh when you hear this, but be able to drive in a car by myself and be independent. And independence for me meant being able to drive in my own car and never having to use a DTC bus, which is the local bus here, ever again in my
Yep.
life.
Okay. That's a
So
great
that
dream.
is my dream. And if you ask me why was that, because I had told myself that the amount of harassment that girls go through
Hmm.
during their travel in local transport is unprecedented in Delhi. And it was harrowing for me when I used to go and travel in those buses. And I told myself that one day when I start working, one day when I become rich, for me, rich was
A
being
car.
able to afford my own public transport. That sorry, not use public transport and own my own vehicle. And that was it. That was the only goalpost that I had, and that's all that happened.
A far compelling story to get independent. And I can really empathize the situation, which at that time it has improved, but it's still a long way. And it's not just in Delhi. There are other parts of India and even the world where you see some situations like this. But you did well. You did that masters, and that same introvert girl, however, got an opportunity to also work in Singapore through PayPal.
Yes,
So, uh, and and if I just look at your career, somewhere financial industry and being a product person, that two came together through PayPal, through Mastercard, and what you currently do. Uh, was being a product person or being a product manager or product head part of that game, a part of your plan as well? Like having a car, being a product person, also part of the plan?
absolutely not, actually. This was also something that happened quite by mistake. So the funny part was that when I was doing my masters in computer science, I didn't know what career I wanted to take. So software engineering, like becoming a software engineer, was part of the was
Hmm.
part of the game, and everybody said that's a career worth taking. But then I
Yeah.
did my now this is the story which very few people know about because it is obviously very predated. But once I started working out, that's when the bust happened, which is the
Yep.
internet bust. And then 9/11 happened, and it was
Hmm.
absolutely a double whammy. No jobs, nothing absolutely available. And I kept telling myself, what have I done to myself? Like, I could have just become a professor, and I would, even by just giving tuitions, I would be right now rolling in money. And what have I
Yep.
done? And at that point in time, I said, okay, I'm going to take a shot at this. I started working as a software engineer. And then I told myself, okay, I'm giving up on everything. I want to go outside and I want to really explore the world. And it was a spam email that landed in my inbox. And I clicked
Okay.
on it and I got the opportunity, believe it or not, to go to Taiwan. So
Oh
I was
wow.
a software engineer working in a hardware firm there. I worked there for 18 months. Had a lot of friends who were, and as a sheltered person who's never, and my first international flight, my third flight overall was to an international
Okay.
country where I knew absolutely nobody. And I started out there, but I realized very soon that I don't think this was my calling as software engineering as a profession. But there was
Hmm.
another profession there which was very well carved out back in the days, which was technical sales, which basically is called technical account management now, or what
Yep.
we call strategic partnerships or business development with obviously with a technical bent of mind,
Yep.
which was carved out. And I told myself, this would be something that probably is worth my while because as a person, I had completely transformed myself in these 2 to 3 years, which I had described to you about. Because the confidence, as well as of course the pushing boundaries that happened during this very very difficult decision that was taken to do and
Hmm.
pursue my masters, because it had to pay off. It was really one of the biggest bets of my life. I think that then materialized into me telling myself, okay, I think there is a chance there and I've done my bit. I think I know that this is not my calling, but what do I do next? And then again,
Okay.
something great happened, which is a friend of mine in Delhi approached me, and we used to study together. So he said, I have a firm and we're doing this, and why don't you join us? And back in the day, startups was not cool, but I
Hmm.
did a startup, and I became a product manager then. So I got introduced to the discipline with a erstwhile chat messenger application.
Okay.
And at a point where text messaging was really, really cool, and ASL, age sex
Hmm.
location,
Yep.
was the way to go on text.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that actually exposed me to both the art as well as the science of product management. And I realized that I think this is where I really find myself to be, not only, I think. probably not only just be good at, but also be challenged, because it is technical. At the same time, it's also very customer focused and customer facing, which I primarily enjoy. It's also uses all the skills that I have, including communication, including cross functional collaborations, and of course relationships, that I pride myself on. And since
Hmm.
that day, I've never really looked back. And as far as my Singapore stint goes, again, that actually was not going to happen. I said no for to it for the longest period of time, and I kept
Okay.
saying no. And at one point in time, there wasn't any option available because my entire development team had moved to Singapore, and I was working out of India as a remote person. And remote working was
Wow.
not something that exists as it does today. It requires a
Yes.
whole lot of discipline. It requires your entire company, as of course your managers, to completely stand behind you and
Yep.
endorse that kind of style of working. And then Singapore happened, and that's how I
Hmm.
reached Singapore. Very half-hearted decision. Absolutely did not want to do that. And probably, if you ask me, like, did it, but not one of those people who probably takes a lot of pride in that. I just feel that it's part of being in big tech, or
Okay.
it's just being part and parcel of who we do and what we do right now. It's like
Hmm.
everybody can do it. It's not really something special.
Interesting. You spoke about you started your career and there was a IT and the 9/11 which happened, and you joined PayPal in 2006, and 2008 2009 the financial crisis happened,
Yes.
and you've been not only been in the product person but also been in the financial industry for at least now good 15 years. And you've seen the finance industry evolving, and in the first 3 years you saw the crash
Hmm.
as well. uh,
Yes.
you know you had those doubts when you joined and you saw the crash that you should bail out of this industry.
So, 9/11 was absolutely hard, because I remember I was in my first, actually second job in Hyderabad at that time, completely alone. And for the first time, I think first time I was staying outside home. And I remember seeing that on TV. And then
Hmm.
after that, hearing it in terms of everybody was really scared. But what transpired after is what I never imagined, because as a young person, you see opportunities booming after
Yep.
you've put in such a lot of hard work, and you know that the IT sector in India was booming at that point in time. To be hit
Agreed.
with a situation in which nobody wanted to touch you, even with a barge pole, I did ask myself the question, what have I gotten myself into? And the situation, and again, you have to take yourself back 15 years, where the internet wasn't as it existed today. Dial up was the only way to go. Even a dial up connection was really dependent on the quality of your telephone connection, and the telephone connection in Delhi depended upon what the weather it was. If it was raining, there was no connection. If it was
Yep.
cold, there was no connection. There was
Hmm.
so many hurdles to cross. So at one point in time, I had to ask myself, like, what am I doing? And then plus I chose very wisely or unwisely to stay back in India, when the options were to really go to the US and Canada, which obviously seemed to be much more viable options. And I kept telling myself, I don't want to do that. So I really did question myself. But at that point in time, once the Taiwan thing came through, I never really looked back. But 2009 was extremely tough from the financial point of view as well. Most companies
Yep.
actually went bust. PayPal, for example, obviously kept doing well, better and better. And of course, eBay, because rather
Yep.
insulated. PayPal was a part of eBay then, did have its setbacks, but PayPal was a small part of eBay. So obviously, you did not feel the pressure, as well as, of course, feel the direct impact. But the difference now is that because of what we are seeing, when this kind of bus cycle happens, as you grow further in your career, the impact is obviously much more widespread. And I think
Hmm.
the ability to then cushion the impact also keeps getting reduced, because when you're younger and you're less experienced, you can probably take a lot more risks.
Yep.
Which obviously does not stand true during other phases of your career. But I never really lost faith in the finance industry. In fact, the only one time that I did question whether I was in the right industry was when PayPal India didn't launch, and there were so many problems with that particular rollout. Because as
Yep.
an Indian, as somebody who's extremely proud and somebody who worked on that particular PRD, product requirements document, I was really disappointed. And of course, it was a huge, a big deal for all of us. We were about a 1,500 people unit in India
Wow.
working on PayPal globally, and each one of us wanted PayPal to launch. It's a matter of huge pride
Mm-hmm.
achievement and unlocking a lot of mind share for a lot of us.
Yep.
And every Indian and being at the front and center of what had happened, being able to put in those compliances, you did feel almost slighted that PayPal India didn't take off. But then you realize that when you work in a financial industry, you really are as fast or as slow as the regulator wants you to be. And at some point in time, there will be regulatory compliances that actually become so important. So this particular experience has actually taught me the tricks of the trade and really being able to understand consumer payments as well as finance and financial services much beyond what we see in terms of the shine.
Yeah.
There is so much that happens behind and underneath the hood that really explains what you see on the outside, which is very difficult to appreciate. But the appreciation grows during harder times because that's
Yep.
when you realize that there is so much that you need to unearth and unbundle for it to
Yep.
work. So never lost hope. And in fact, even after COVID, I know that there is so much talk around what will happen, whether
Yep.
the companies are going to even survive. But I'm very hopeful of the future. In fact, I actually see that in 5 or 10 years' time, people will not be talking about finance. They will actually be right part of that in every single way. And the number of industries and sub industries and sub units that have cropped up will only keep growing because the
Yep.
industry keeps expanding in every single way.
Yeah. And finance industry has definitely evolved. It is still evolving. People still say that they are laggards in adopting, but like rightly you said, the regulators can move fast or slow, but there is a speed which people adopt or the bodies adopt because you have to evaluate risk from all multiple angles. Like if you just see the speed which the Beam UPI or the UPI transactions
Mm.
which are happening in India, and
Mm.
I always thank whoever took that decision in India for launching
Mm.
UPI before COVID, because in COVID, the
Mm.
touchless transactions have really scaled up, and we all feel safe today to do those transactions is because of UPI at a great extent. Today, whether it's a local kirana store or whether it is a delivery person, you can just UPI it, and you're done with your payment. You don't need to remove cash and put yourself at risk. So I think it's been done really well. And you spoke about the future. And today, if you see the amount of advertisements, which is heartening
Mm.
to see about bitcoins and cryptocurrency being put on TV,
Mm.
which was never seen on TV in India at least, and NFTs and Dogecoins and all of them being spoken pretty big. Do you see India adopting that at least in the next couple of years? It is already adopting, but at scale.
I actually do, and I know that there's a lot of lobbying. Of course, whether it's right or wrong, I think that's for another debate about how crypto is going to help about 1.3 billion Indians. But
Mhm.
I do know one thing, that as far as currency as well as the ability to have multiple form of payments is concerned, I think definitely everybody realizes that there is certain value in asset classes being available to a wider variety of people, and the ability to be able to bring in more people within the fold and go much beyond the typical ways of being able to interact and as well as transact, which is going
Yeah.
beyond cards and banks, etc. But as far as crypto is concerned, there is a lot that is happening with the central banks becoming more active, and of course there is a lot that can be questioned in terms of the ability to have trust in transactions which necessarily don't fall within the regulatory gambit. And a consumer such as you and me, who probably know a little bit about it, may still be able to protect themselves. But as far as larger consumer and merchant interest is concerned, you have to be mindful of the fact that that also needs to be accounted for. So while there is a lot to say for the positives of what crypto is able to offer to the world, including in terms of asset classes being available and being able to generate a huge amount of wealth for a certain few individuals, as well as, of course, people who've invested in it. I would
Hmm.
question, I wouldn't question what it will do in the long term. I will only say this, that there will be enough and more opportunity for everybody to participate in the ecosystem. But I do feel that a certain amount of regulation would happen. And once that does happen, then a certain amount of trust would be built into the system, which would mean that the bad actors would have to probably start behaving themselves and fall into line. While on the other hand, a lot of good people with good intentions will actually start using the system for what it is, and which will actually help with the digitization, which is what the world needs. Because at the end of the day, the intent is really to make sure that we are able to increase, for example, efficiencies, be able to reduce the cost of transactions, be able to do things better, faster, and cheaper. And to that end, anything that supports that particular intention should always be supported. And I really see that. I think we're seeing this evolution happen. We're probably right now at the very start of the wave. So we're not able to see 10 years ahead or 20 years ahead, but
Yep.
probably I would give it another 2 to 3 years before we start seeing how it shapes up, especially in the emerging economies where the opportunity size is fairly huge. And it's already started in the Caribbean, where sand dollar, for example, has been introduced.
Yep.
And I see that as a perfect example in which the regulator has taken a very calibrated position on actually rolling this out with the complete intention of being completely aware of how this particular transaction is going to be generated into the system, as well as being able to track it. And they're doing it as a pilot, and so far it seems to be rolling out with the right intent. And then, of course, there are others which are probably a little more questionable, which is associated
Yep.
with China and the intent to roll out a programmable currency. But we'll see how this all pans out.
Switching gears and talking about the other half of your career, which was product management. And over the years, you've had amazing background with working with some of the largest corporates who do really a good job when it comes to product management. And you've seen product management as a practice or as a career evolve also. Earlier, there were conversations like Google is a university to develop product managers, and they have developed their own AMP program, which uh, I would say incubates as well as graduates product managers. What's your perspective of product management as an evolution or as a practice in the last couple of years, and where do you see that going forward?
See, product management in a nutshell right now, in a single word, is hot. Like,
Okay.
you name product management and put it on social media, and you see the kind of engagement that you get. And especially since
Mm-hmm.
last year, since we've seen this remote working paradigm suddenly take shapes for some strange reason, a couple of sectors have suddenly seen an upswing, at least in terms of what I'm seeing. And of course, this is completely anecdotal evidence, but then I can also say that this is supported by the number of inquiries that I'm getting myself of mentorship for younger people who are trying to get into product management. So one is, of course, product management for what it is. And second is data, which obviously
Mm.
everybody is talking about because of the large amount of data that we're all creating and the
Yep.
ability to therefore use it. And third, I would say, is definitely financial services and subparts of that in terms of the emerging spaces. And that again is a very large topic. But product management as it exists, it's always existed. It's one of those disciplines which is more of an art than it is a science. At the end of the day, we can always debate about whether the scientific aspects of how you do it are something that can also be almost templatized to a degree of fault, and it can become mechanical. But I would think that product management is one of those disciplines whereby, as a person, as long as you are organized, as long as you have good communication skills and you have the ability to work with people and work with teams, you would make a good product manager with the right skills. Now, as far as skills are concerned, skills can always be acquired, but the attitude is something that you're born with, and probably you hone it with time. And attitude is something that really differentiates a good product manager from a not so great one. Because if you're a product manager is primarily a person who keeps everybody together to reach the goalpost, while being
Hmm.
absolutely accountable for everything and having responsibility for everything, but and without having the authority or the team management to be able to own and drive any of the outcomes, because these people don't necessarily report into you. This is one of the most difficult things to do. Now,
Hmm.
over the years, and I understand that Google has the APM program, Facebook has the APM program as well. And in America, we're seeing a lot of companies actually open themselves up to providing 6-month rotational programs, including younger firms, including
Mm-hmm.
startups as well, whereby people who are graduating from college have the ability to rotate careers which and career roles within the same company to try and see where best they fit in. But I would think that product management is probably the culmination, and it's one of those intersections of so many other disciplines, including tech design as well as basic product thinking and knowledge. That one doesn't can't box it in terms of who can make a good product manager, who can't, what kind of skills do you need to have, what kind of certifications would you need to have in order to become a great one. I've seen product managers who have great skills, have the best, come from the best B schools, and yet be not as good enough as somebody who's really persevering, consistent, and extremely dogmatic about spending their time really getting their blinders on and just doing the job that is required to be done and keeping their head down. Now, if you ask me why does that happen, I think that is just the way the skill is. It's something that can be learned, but the attitude is something that you can't really learn. And that's what I look for when I hire product managers. What is the kind of attitude that they have? How well can they
Okay.
work with a cross-functional team? And how good are they with understanding and being okay with chaos and change?
But being on a journey, which is a defined journey, uh, there is a lot of unpredictability, and you spoke about chaos and change. But somewhere the product manager is also to ensure that through that chaos and change, people don't lose focus on the end goal. And the end goal, the goalpost can keep evolving because the product evolves. Uh, how is that a good skill to have to ensure that okay, you can manage chaos, but you're also pretty focused on what you want to do and what you want to achieve?
Anis, you've absolutely hit the nail on its head. A great product manager is, I always say this and I get panned for this, but a great product manager is always the best project manager that you can have on the team because
Yeah.
they are able to manage time, people, and money with whatever they have and to make things work. Because at the end of the day, all that they care about is that customer delivery, is that customer commitment, is that goalpost that they have promised to deliver on, and they are
Hmm.
obsessed about it to the point of fault. Now,
Yeah.
a product manager who keeps that eye on that ball is never going to lose sight of whatever comes their way. It's like going through a maze and probably going round, going in circles, going around challenges, but still trying to keep an eye on that last end prize. And that is why
Yeah.
I said attitude is what differentiates a great product manager than skills. Because skills you can acquire, but what kind of attitude will take this person to that goalpost is complete focus.
Hmm.
And that's not something that you can get very easily, and that's not something you can acquire very easily as well. And you're absolutely right. A product manager has to own the outcome, and owning of the
Yeah.
outcome means that they have to be responsible for making sure that no matter what comes their way, they always keep
Yeah.
an eye on only that end prize.
But the reverse is not true. A great project manager can never be a product manager, meaning I've seen that failing miserably.
Absolutely.
Uh, People who presume that they can be a product manager because they've been great at project management. Switching gears and talking a little bit more about you as an individual, Monica. Uh, in your career, you've seen different companies, different organizations, different cultures, uh, and you've grown through the ranks as well. Do you have any mentors whom you look up to, or people whom you get coached as part of your career for your career?
Absolutely, Anis. I do, and I've been very lucky. I have somebody who I met during my PayPal stint who happens to be not only a mentor but also a great friend. And
Okay.
he has been somebody who has been a constant support, but also a voice of reason. Almost
Hmm.
to the point where sometimes when I have to make a decision, I can hear his voice in my head saying, "Do it or don't do it."
Okay.
But that has developed over time. I cannot underline the or highlight the extreme importance of having a great mentor and somebody who completely supports you. And
Hmm.
when people say this, because they always think about leadership and career progression, what people forget is to even be effective in your job as a product manager. It's a very lonely profession. You
Yeah.
don't have like as an engineer, you have multiples who are in the same position as you, so you can talk about what you're facing.
Yeah.
They will relate to you. But as a product manager, you're a leader but you're not a leader. You're
Hmm.
accountable but you don't own anything. You're responsible for meeting up with as people as senior as CEOs, but at the same
Hmm.
time, you're not a CEO. So
Yeah.
you have to understand it's almost a dichotomous differentiation and segregation in your head that you have to keep switching in between in order to make sense of what is going to is happening around you and is happening with you. So a mentor just keeps you balanced and grounded with the information that you have, and if they are from the product world, they will be able to guide you with their experience and knowledge of how to break through a particular challenge and to still keep your mind focused on really that end ball that we keep speaking about. But
Yeah.
finding a good mentor, somebody who is great at his discipline or her discipline, is not very easy, because great product managers are quite difficult to find. But if you find a good one, you should definitely make sure that you find a way to be able to add value to his or her life as well. Because at the end of the day, a mentor relationship is only as valuable as you want to make it. It cannot be just an ask and never a give back.
Hmm.
That's one. And second, in terms of mentorship for product managers, again, I can't overemphasize this, but product management is something that you can learn as long as there is somebody you can also shadow, emulate, or almost role play with. And a great
Hmm.
mentor, especially if they've been in the product scene, they will be able to almost see 6 or 7 steps ahead of you, and will be able to tell you of what is likely to happen, therefore to be able to avoid your fall. And
Yep.
that kind of learning is not something that can be imparted via books. It's real life skills that really provide that kind of experience and knowledge. And nothing can prepare you to be able to upskill yourself than having a great mentor and just having an hourly conversation, maybe 2 times a month or even once a month. And again, for especially the women out there, if you don't have a great mentor, seek one, not just for career progression, but also for talking about product management. And for the men out there, always have a mentor. Speak to them
Yep.
about product management discipline for what it is.
Talking about the support, and you've had a very interesting career. You did speak about your parents. How has family supported your career?
So, Anis, I say this all the time. I think my family is probably the only reason why I'm doing what I am.
Okay.
It may sound morbid, but I'm grateful that my parents, allowed me to stay alive when it would have been easy decision for them had they chosen not to. Because having two girl children wasn't one of the wisest decisions for them, and especially at the time where it was absolutely okay
Yep.
during the times that I was born in, not to have two girl children and probably opt to have a male child.
Hmm.
Second is that I always had the best. My parents were not really the richest, but they already always made sure that I got the best education, and so did my sister, and we always had the freedom. But I think the biggest support has been that they've always been the backbone of any decision that I have taken, and especially of my failures as well. And we normally never speak about failures, and as a family, again, in an Indian setup, failures are not something that you speak about. And it's not like an American movie where you sit across the table and you literally hash out what's not working in your life. But just having a backbone and a support, and knowing that everything you do, you'll have somebody who'll be your fallback, doesn't come easy. And my life has been full of troughs and lows, to the point at one point in time, in my personal life, I've faced a lot of challenges. And it was very difficult, and there was nobody I could speak to or help me get through it. And it was only my parents, whether it is financial assistance, to where they have actually sacrificed their own financial health in order to make mine better, or it has
Hmm.
been others. It has always been the support of my family. And even right now, I've been through a little bit of a traumatic situation on the personal side a couple of years back. And it has been my sister who's been absolutely wonderful. And she has taken on the reins of making sure that the amount of support that is needed in order to get me through that set of situations has happened. So I can't overemphasize having a great family and support structure to pull
Yep.
you through this. And I also would say that I have that mentor that I have spoken about, who's been that constant pillar of support, and a set of great friends who also stood by me, and I do the same for them.
Very well said, ma'am. I completely agree. All of us. in our careers do come across situations or crossroads where we have to prioritize something. And it's the time where family really helps us push through. Uh, the reason you and I are talking is because of Clubhouse. We met there, we got to know each other, and that's how we have connected and the conversations have started. And you are pretty active, and congratulations on the Asian super movers. It keeps growing, some very great conversations happening. uh, and what's your perspective of this new platform? It's not new anymore, it's been more than a year now. But what's your perspective of Clubhouse or social media platforms like Twitter's? How can an individual really leverage that, either to build their own brand or pass on their message as things move along?
So, Anis, I'm grateful that I met a lot of great people on Clubhouse. I say this and I'm laughing about it because it
Yeah.
might sound almost patronizing and flattering, but it's very hard to run into good people.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes it's just a matter of luck that you meet them. So the last year has been tough because of COVID, where physical
Yeah.
interactions have been absolutely zero, and I can't understand how I would run into somebody on Zoom or anywhere else. But suddenly the serendipity associated with these kind of interactions has suddenly become real with Clubhouse and interaction mediums like this, where we are
Mhm.
meeting a lot of people because the access has been democratized to the point where you and I can be in a virtual room and still not know each other, but not be hesitant to reach out in a professional environment. Of course, there are many ways that you could use a platform, and there are people who use it for various other ways as well. But for me, I was very clear that I'm there for professional reasons, and the
Yeah.
amount of people that I've gotten to know outside of my immediate professional network on LinkedIn has been phenomenal. Being able to run into people who you can have a conversation with, and the conversation normally tells you a lot about the individual, especially voice, which is obviously a lot better and effective than text.
Hmm.
Having said that, I tell a lot of people, including myself, that any time that is spent on social is probably not wasted as long as you're getting some return out of it. And people know you and relate to you with the kind of content that you put out there. So while
Yeah.
Twitter can be demonic for the kind of religious and political monstrosity that it has become right now, I can
Yeah.
also tell you that Twitter threads, the amount of knowledge that is freely available on Twitter is phenomenal. And you can use a platform for the ills or you can use it for good. And I'm
Yeah.
using Twitter and Clubhouse for good. I would suggest to everybody to have your own personal brand, be on these platforms and interact with people, learn from it, and spend your time wisely, because there's so much of learning to be had if only you spend your time following and being with the right people and building your own community around that. And that's how I met you. And I'm very glad that I've run into people such as you.
On that note, I know you have a soon room coming up on Clubhouse, and I don't want to take much of your time. Monica, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for taking time out. And best of luck with your room coming up on Clubhouse.
Thank you so much. It's been absolutely amazing talking to you, and it was absolutely easy, as if we were talking over coffee. I hope that that
Sure.
virtual coffee is translated into a real life conversation over coffee sometime very soon. Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you for listening in. And we close yet another episode of Masters Decoded. If you've enjoyed the episode, please, you can help us out by sharing it on social media. I would personally appreciate that. It's how we can reach more listeners, and the more listeners we have, the more awesome guests I can get in touch and convince to participate in these conversations that are a joy to have for me, and I hope they are a joy for you to listen as well. You can also help a lot leaving reviews on iTunes or your podcast service of choice. Reviews are surprisingly helpful in supporting the podcast to get to more listeners. If this episode has intrigued you, I would request you to subscribe to the podcast to stay up to date and get notified to the future episodes. With that, I bid you and see you in the next episode.